Hello, and welcome to Creating Custom Content on a Budget, a webinar brought to you by Ginzametrics. I'm your presenter, Erin Robbins, and I'm Ginzametrics President and COO, as well as a digital marketing and technology professional of about 15 years. Due to the number of attendees on the webinar and to respect everybody's time, participants are muted during the presentation. Presentation materials will actually be shared following the webinar, and questions or comments can be submitted to myself using the contact information on the screen or to our account manager, Dave, who you can reach at dave@ginzametrics.com. So let's get started talking about why we're all here. We've got to create custom content, and we really need to do this on a budget. So really, why is creating custom content so challenging? So content needs to be compelling and it also needs to be unique. So compelling content, obviously what we're talking about is something that's really going to attract your user, and something unique means it's not something that's already out there. And that's for a number of reasons. Mostly when we're talking about organic, for search engine reasons. Your content also needs to be consistent. That means consistency of typically tone, style, and branding, but also consistently released. So you can't just put out one piece of content 5 years ago and expect that you're going to kind of continue to generate interest. And also, typically, there's a budget. Sometimes the budget is zero. And creating compelling content that's findable by your audience is hard. Doing it consistently is harder. And doing it without a budget is typically a don't even talk to me about this, it's impossible kind of a scenario. But really, let's not focus on the depressing stuff. We can actually do this. So, what I want to talk to you about today is Found Friday, which is a case study in kind of really making content yours and making it work. Or, as I like to say, how we make all of our content for free and drive inbound leads based on relevant topics. So, a little bit about the success of Found Friday as an example is over the past 3 years, we've created more than 90 unique videos, over 130 blog posts from those videos, 12 slide shares, and 4 ebooks with more than 30,000 minutes of video watch time. And 80% of all of our leads come directly from this content. All right, so I know that this is where we're kind of getting to, okay, you've sold us, now shut up and tell us how it works. So the basics are each week we record a 15 to 30-minute video using YouTube Livestream or Google Hangouts. That video then becomes the basis for content that ranges from blog posts and landing pages to a podcast, slide shares, ebooks, etc. Those are all shared across social media, email, our site, and found via search. During the show, viewers can join live. We tweet using live hashtags for the show, and we can take Q&A from various channels, including things like Twitter, Facebook Live, and directly within the Google Hangout stream. Afterward, we create all this content from a single Found Friday episode. For example, a blog post, it goes to a podcast that's now on iTunes, videos, slideshares, and landing pages. And sometimes we get additional content, such as ebooks, white papers, and case studies. And that particularly happens when we actually have a guest join us. So sometimes we invite guests to come and co-host or co-present. Sometimes we have a roundtable, and that typically either results in multiple blog posts or something longer like multiple slide shares, ebooks, white papers, and case studies. So each of those assets can be distributed in a variety of ways. And really the bonus here is that they can be distributed for free. So for example, we do a blog post and then that becomes an email that goes out to customers, prospects, and leads, each getting a slightly different version of the email. We also share it across social media. So obviously it's available on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, through our RSS feed, Google+. It's also available, in the blog post. We have a link to the original YouTube video, which we then embed on our site, etc. Then, of course, it's findable on search. Podcasts, kind of the same thing. We've also got podcast subscribers. We also have podcast platforms such as iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, and SoundCloud, findable there. The video itself is available in a variety of places. And then we've got, landing pages. And so one Found Friday episode gives us all of this content spread out across all of these various areas. And if you have some money to spend, You can actually pay for the distribution of all of this content as well, right? So, like Outbrain, Google AdWords, Taboola, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube all have advertising options that you can leverage if you've got any budget. And sometimes even a few dollars a day can be really helpful. So, how do you get started? So, you have to figure out obviously your five W's and an H, which is your why, your who, your what, your when, your where, and your how. So, why? Before you get ready, you've got to have a topic to talk about. So, here are some suggestions for figuring out your topics because this is one of the hardest things to do is to come up with something to talk about, especially if you're talking about something regularly. So, try not to pick a topic that's too broad, for example, cars, or too narrow, for example, classic cars from 1959 that are red. This is going to either give you way too many potential options or too broad of an audience for the broader ones, or so narrow of a topic that you'll either run out of things to talk about pretty quickly, or you're not really going to have a big enough audience. So you may want to do something that would allow you to do a segment or one episode or a specific post on classic cars from 1959 that are red, but that can't be something that you necessarily talk about day in and day out or all week, every week for years at a time. You also want to choose something that interests you or the person that's going to be creating the content that you already have knowledge on. So this seems like kind of a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how often, people say, well, we can talk about X, Y, and Z, but the person who's actually got to create this content may not be specifically knowledgeable about all the ins and outs, or the type of knowledge that they may have may not be the kind of thing that's actually going to be interesting to an audience member. So you got to really kind of figure out what interests the person and what they have knowledge on. And it's great when you've got a good mixture of both interest and information. Um, and then lastly, you really want to figure out what's going to make you or somebody from your brand talking about this topic unique. Research what other content on this topic is already out there and who's creating it. So if you kind of have come up with a list of topics and things, what you're going to want to do is, do a quick search, find out who's already doing it and what type of content it is, and like what makes that unique and how you might fit into that ecosystem. So next up is the who. Who's actually going to create this content? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be somebody else? Is it going to be you and somebody else? Is it going to be a group of people? Is it going to be a spokesperson, like a celebrity? Okay, so some suggestions for your sanity on picking somebody to do your talking here is pick a person or group of people that you can rely on to fulfill their time commitment. Now, you would be surprised how I feel like I don't need to say it, but it's actually really important and it happens all the time. People will dedicate and say, yes, I could do a 15-minute video every week or a 10-minute call. And what happens is, really that it takes longer than that, right? So I'll tell you that one Found Friday episode requires coming up with a topic for the Found Friday episode, creating some show notes, and making sure that you can actually talk coherently about something for 15 minutes straight, which is in fact more of a challenge than it may sound like. And then also coordinating, making sure that you're not duplicating content from previous episodes or other things on your site, making sure that you have maybe unique materials to present alongside of it, and various things like that. So it is a time commitment. And if it's not going to be you, or if it is going to be you, make sure that you actually take whatever you think it's going to take to do it and double that amount of time set aside for at least the first few weeks, to make sure that you've really got ample time, especially because there's going to be a learning curve. So next, you're going to want to figure out what's unique about this person or you and how to leverage that best during whatever content creation you're going to do, right? So maybe it's that this person has a really unique presenting style, or creates great graphics, or has amazing anecdotes, and you want to be able to leverage that. Figure that out and find a way to make sure that that's actually at the forefront of how it is that they're creating content and what they're presenting. Um, Ask, if it's you, ask people about what they think your best qualities are and what some of your annoying habits are. It really only hurts for a minute to hear it, but it can help you a ton in actually having to create better content, whether that's something that you do on video, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but whether it's a video or a podcast or blog posts or slide shares or something else entirely. it helps to know what kinds of things make people want to listen to you or want to consume your content and what might drive some people away. Okay, so now is the what, right? So here it's time to pick your medium. Is it going to be a blog? Is it going to be a podcast, a video, recorded phone conversation, anything? So I'll tell you a little bit about how Found Friday actually got started, which was when I joined Ginza. There were only a couple of us working here, and this was years ago, and we had to create some content to really get out there. And the problem was we kept hiring people to do this content creation, but what we recognized was we were having to teach them all these things about why search and content marketing and organic marketing and everything were interesting in relationship to our specific platform and how we felt about our industry. And we had all these ideas because we were building the platform. And so Ray, Ginzametrics founder, and I realized we were having all these really great calls, these phone calls, where we would sit there and we would kind of just riff about industry issues and topics and things that we thought of from a product standpoint. And, we really thought to ourselves, hey, what if we just started recording these and then we could find somebody to create a transcript? We could turn them into blog posts. So then we actually ended up taking that a step further and agreeing to get on this like short Google Hangout once a week and just kind of talk about, what's this week's kind of trending news, what's a theme that we want to touch on for this week, and, what's like one tip that we would give everybody. And we started doing that, and then we started inviting guests. And then it really did start to build up on its own to the point where, we would take each episode and be able to send and get a transcript from it and then create that into a blog post and then some of those into slide shares and some of those like we would group content that all kind of seemed to go together that was thematic. So if we had 4 or 5 shows on a particular topic, we could create an ebook. So I can tell you, like that's kind of how we ended up picking the medium for ours. But suggestions for you to pick a medium is find something that fits your style and your availability. So with us, it actually ended up moving on to just being me on Found Fridays, and that's because, it's really hard to tie up 2 company executives all week, every week. And like I said, there is some preparation time. So you need to find something that will actually fit your style. And if you're the kind of person who really knows that you're going to be nervous on camera, consider a podcast or consider something else. You really can do it where if you want to have a phone conversation, if you know somebody that you just have great conversations with, just record the conversations and use the transcripts to create content. Look for a gap in content type in your market. So remember when I was saying to go and look at what's already available out there? What you want to do is you want to see, hey, does it look like there's a ton of infographics about this, but not a lot of videos? Or does it look like there's a lot of how-to videos, but not a lot of interactive, kind of more landing page type things, or something downloadable like a PDF? You'd actually be surprised at how often people still download PDFs, and that's actually kind of a missing piece for some folks. And then understand if there are things that are going to block you from being able to start doing this, pick the path of least resistance. So if you're picking a medium that somebody in your organization is going to be really resistant to, or something that's going to require a ton of setup by your organization, and you're not the person who can set it up yourself, my recommendation would be to not start there or to find a way to do it yourself and show some traction so that somebody will give you the support that you need. But you're never going to get it off the ground if you have to run through a million roadblocks just to get kind of the first, to get like the first episode or post or piece of content created. All right. So you have to figure out what other content you're going to create from this. So this is kind of, if you're going to create a blog, send emails, turn it into SlideShare, etc. Here are some suggestions. One is don't bite off more than you can chew or more than you can reasonably delegate, right? So we're talking about creating custom content on a budget, which often means either trying to do things yourself or with like a fairly lean team, or not bringing on a lot of additional resources, right? And I think everybody should be budget conscious, even if you have a bunch of resources, because I don't believe that we should just waste money, even if we have it. But you want to make sure if you have a lean team or if it's just you, don't propose this original idea where you're going to say, hey, we're going to do this podcast every week, and then we're going to get blog posts, infographics, slide shares, emails, landing pages, all these different things, and you're either going to say that you're going to do it, and then you find out it actually takes hours to get all that done, or that you're going to delegate it to a bunch of people. Who then don't have time to do it, and then it kind of falls apart, right? Um, Again, go back to finding out what kind of content is already out there, who's creating them, and what their spin is, and make sure that if you're going to create the same type of content that they are, based on your, like whatever, your origination content is, that you actually create your own unique spin, and so that you can kind of satisfy your own audience need. All right, so let's talk about the when. You're going to need a frequency. How often are you actually willing to do the initial content generator? For example, like how often was I willing to get on camera and do a 15 to 30-minute video recording? And I really realized that that was weekly. And then, when I had to start doing some travel early on this year, I've actually not been doing as many recordings. And I can tell you that finding time to get on camera and do a recording every week can be complicated. And so you have to make sure that you can kind of commit to a schedule, or that if you miss some time, you can either make it up, or, that it'll be all right. This is especially important for things like live audiences, right? So if you tell people that you're going to be available live every Friday at 2 p.m., and then you just don't show up sometimes, you're going to lose a lot of those subscribers. So you need to be really careful with that. So some suggestions for sanity is start out with bi-monthly or monthly to get the timing down, and to like see how long it actually takes you to prepare the initial content creation with like notes, images, research, anything like that. And then it'll also help you figure out how long it takes you to create the content afterward. Especially if you're looking at things like graphics or video editing. I will tell you, I save a ton of time by not actually editing any of the videos for Found Friday. Some of them are really rough. I was recording a lot of them from home so that I wasn't in a noisy office, or open space. And you can hear, like, sometimes people ring the doorbell, sometimes dogs bark, all kinds of things happen. Doesn't really bother me. We get so much leverage out of it. And, that's actually part of my unique style, right? Which is extremely casual. So I think that, everybody would have a different version of whether or not they're okay with that. So you just have to kind of be prepared for that to be okay. All right. So where is this going to live? Do you need a YouTube channel? Do you need a podcast host? Is it your bat cave? So you have to consider, kind of when you're talking about where the content is going to live, is like, what is the ease of manipulation, and how hard is it to actually edit videos, sounds, images, etc. So if you're recording something originally in one specific area, but then the content kind of lives there and it's hard to get back out or to manipulate and make changes in, and you don't want to buy additional editing equipment or things like that, really consider whether or not that needs to be the origination point, or whether you want to actually put it there afterward. So like YouTube is a good example in the fact that they allow you to do some simple video editing and management now, and they continue to kind of increase those capabilities, which is great. Um, you can add in caps and link people out from there now. You can have the option of doing, ads within your video network as you kind of build up some subscription management. You can go in and kind of slice and dice stuff a little bit, which is really great. You may want to do something like ScreenFlow, where you can actually go in and create and then try again a bunch of times. So with YouTube, like kind of once you create it on Google Hangouts, it goes live. So you gotta jump in there and delete it, which I've only had to do twice, but I will tell you both times, I was a little nervous about how quickly I could get in there before anybody might have seen the videos that went poorly. And then, you also want to consider ownership. Does it live on your domain, or is it somewhere else, right? So when you're talking about building domain authority and then like embedding stuff and like where the original video is going to live, or a podcast or something like that, or blog post, SlideShare, etc. If you're posting on something like Medium or some other place, you got to really think about, where do you want to drive traffic? How do you want people to be able to find it? How big of a deal is domain authority? Things like that. And then think about the ease of access by other people who may, like within your organization, who may need to edit or deal with this content and manipulate it. So is it in a format that's easily accessible and manipulatable by other people who may need to have that sort of access? All right. So the last one, which is how are you going to distribute your content? Are you going to use social media, email, carrier pigeon, etc. All right, so some suggestions. Check for hashtags, subdomains, Facebook pages, etc., that you might want beforehand. So here's a good example. If you originally looked up, like for Found Friday, I wanted to make sure that I actually could do things like Found Friday, which is actually part of something that we do called Found Conference. But I wanted to make sure that those things were available before I just started creating a ton of content using that specific nomenclature. Because then what happens is, you go out, you start using this, and you start hashtagging things or creating stuff, and you want to kind of grow it a little bit more, and all those names are already taken. And a lot of times it's not by something competing, but heaven forbid that it actually is, and you're kind of stepping on somebody else's toes, and it looks a little bit weird, or you may be inadvertently driving traffic to them. Um, so be really careful, like just do a little bit of due diligence first. Um, Discuss distribution internally with anybody else involved. So, like if you have a social media person and it's not you that would need to be able to get on board with distributing this, and they have a platform, like talk to them about how that would work and about timing and what your expectations about promotion beforehand might be. So, let's say it is a live event, like a video, webinar, podcast, etc. Do you need them to get online and drive promotion? Do you have an email marketing person who may need to create some invitation emails or promotional emails? Like, how can you get them involved? And you're going to want to think about how you can group and track this content to analyze and show effectiveness. So this is the most important part, and we're going to talk about this for a minute here at the end, which is with creating custom content. One of the things that's really important, because really what we're talking about on a budget here is your time. So Found Fridays have been great in the fact that it really all in, I would say I spend about an hour dealing with the actual episode. So about 30 minutes to 40 minutes of research and note prep, because I really only try to talk about things that I'm already kind of thinking about and have some knowledge of, and I've been doing it for a while. So really about 30 or 40 minutes of prep, and then about 15 to 20 minutes on the show, right? So an hour in for the show, which is really not bad. And then after the show, getting the blog transcript, I actually pay somebody on Upwork to do that. I pay them $10 each time, which is really no big deal. And then from that, I create a blog post. And then from there, we can create things like slide shares and ebooks and stuff, um, which sometimes I outsource and sometimes, like we do internally. The one thing that we have done that's been really important, though, is we group all of this content so that we can see how we're actually expending our resources in generating this. So everything for Found Friday has a Found Friday URL. So everything is like /Found Friday and then whatever the topic is. And everything in Found Friday is actually tagged inside of the Ginza Metrics platform. And using that tag allows me to go in and say, okay, in my analytics provider, which is both Ginzametrics and Google Analytics, how much content do we actually have spread across things like videos and slideshares, et cetera, all of which have, URLs inside of Ginza and their own things on YouTube and iTunes, and all of these various places. I can go in and I can say, hey, of all of the content that we have on our site, Found Friday content that originated from that 15-minute video actually accounts for 80% of all leads that are coming in, and accounts for about 70% of all total new content on the website that we have, all new content generated. And it's the fodder for, I would say, about 90% of our social media posts, and typically 80 to 90% of our emails. So when I can group those things, I can start to show efficacy of our Found Friday episodes versus all other types of content that we create. Now, where it gets really cool is I've actually started creating subgroups a few years ago. And what the subgroups do is they actually take Found Friday themes. So for a little while, we were talking about account-based marketing toward the end of last year, right? So then I've got, 4 episodes on account-based marketing and then related blog posts and other materials. So all that stuff is in a specific content group. Then I've also got content, around, let's say, competitor monitoring and competitor discovery. Those are all in a group. So then what I can do is I can actually go back and compare, of all of my Found Friday episodes thematically, what seems to be really resonating with users, what draws in the most attraction across website organic visits, email opens, social media shares. Like I can really look and kind of dive in and check that out. And then from there, I can go in and say, okay, maybe I need to create more around this, or it seems like people liked this topic. What's kind of the next step past that topic? Um, so that really helps me figure out what content to generate next, or things that don't seem to really be fitting in with our audience overall. So I would say that, really at the end of the day, make sure you've set yourself up to be able to track and showcase the performance and the great things that you've done, because there's no point in kind of doing all this. If you can't prove that you've spent this time wisely, even if there's not a lot of money on the line, because, as we all know, time is money. So with that, really it's time to hit the road and, get out there and kind of get some stuff created. Thank you so much for attending Creating Custom Content on a Budget. Please feel free to send questions or comments to me. You can reach me at Erin@ginzametrics.com. You can tweet to us at Ginzametrics, or feel free to reach out to Dave, who is Dave@Ginzametrics.com. And we are all happy to help and answer any questions anytime that you have.